In this episode, we're going to be learning how to make this amazing anime CG effect for video games or animations completely for free. Enjoy! Go ahead and open up a fresh version of Blender. For this tutorial, I am using Blender 4.1, but any later version will work. We're going to start with our base mesh to turn it into this. Okay, go ahead and nuke that default cube as is customary. And we're going to go ahead and Shift A, curve, Bezier curve. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and 7 on the numpad to go into top view, and this just allows me, whenever I'm in edit mode, to not rotate in any direction I don't want to. Okay, so we're going to go down to the curve properties with the curve selected. We're going to go to depth, and we're going to go ahead and increase that depth amount. And so what that does is just gives a little thickness to it. Click that fill caps button for me. And then we're going to go ahead and give this thing some shading. This is our base mesh done. Yes, it is that easy. I'm going to go ahead and close these areas down because I'm not going to use them for the sake of this tutorial. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and hit 7 again, zoom in a little bit so I can see what I'm doing. I'm going to make a new material there. I'm going to go ahead and name this material whatever you like. I'm going to name it Powers. Okay, so then we're going to go ahead and delete that principal BSDF and add in an mix shader. I'm going to go ahead and connect that mix shader to the surface tab on the output. I'm going to Shift A, search, and add in an emission shader, and duplicate that emission shader. Put the top one in the top socket and the bottom one in the bottom socket on that mix shader node. Next, we're going to go ahead and add a color ramp. I'm going to go ahead and connect that color from the color ramp to the top emission node. So I'm going to go with a lighter blue on this one, kind of like the character's name's Deku. Kind of like his ability is sort of like a black lightning with blue outlines. I'm just going to duplicate that color ramp and plug it into the bottom emission and swap these colors around. Next, I'm going to add in a noise texture and plug the factor into the factor of the top color ramp. Go ahead and duplicate that noise texture and plug the factor into the factor on the bottom color ramp. I'm going to go ahead and mess with the scale on the top. I'm going to go ahead and increase it somewhere around there is probably pretty good. 37.1 is what I decided on for now. You can always come back and change these values a little bit later to get the desired outcome. I change the roughness to 1. I'm going to leave the bottom two where they were default. Okay. We're going to change the scale on the bottom noise texture to something a little higher, somewhere around 94.6, 95, something like that. Wherever it looks good to your eye. We're going to go ahead and increase the detail to 4 and increase the roughness to 1. And we can go ahead and leave these bottom two as they were default again. As you can see, if you play with the slider on the bottom color ramp, you can get a sharper or less sharp gradient between the smaller texture that is kind of underlaid underneath the larger, more splotchy one, which is the top color ramp above this one here. Okay. As you can see, if you just play with these sliders here, you can still sort of get a more rough pattern. And it really just depends on what you're looking for. I think a little less looks good because we're going to make it really bright later on. And then they'll really pop. And of course at the end, once we have all these rough settings, we can really dial it in. I'm going to go ahead and enable bloom under the render tab. And so what that does is it just gives it a little bit of little bit of brightness, a little bit of glow effect to it there, just like that. I'll turn up the strength of these emission shaders to somewhere where I want, and that's good to start out with for now. Next, we're going to add in another noise texture. And with this, we're going to go ahead and essentially add a mask to the mix shader here. Okay. So we're going to give it that outline effect. So I'm going to add in a mix color and plug it in right in between the noise texture and the mix shader. Gonna pull these up out of the way so I have some more room. Okay. And then I am going to Shift A, add in a layer weight node. In this case, I'm going to use the facing. You could also probably use the Fresnel on the top, but in our case, facing is good for any kind of animation you're going to be doing maybe later on. Okay, we're going to add a color ramp in between that layer weight node and the noise texture, and go ahead and plug it into the B socket on that mix color as well. I'm going to change the layer weight amount to around 0.960. And we're going to swap these little sliders, swap them around like that, so it gives us a nice little gradient on it. If you increase or decrease the factor, you can see that you get kind of that outline effect going on. Right now it is a blacker outline, and I kind of want that to be a brighter blue outline. So I'm going to leave the factor where it is, and I'm going to fix that here in a minute. Just make sure your settings are similar to these. You can always mess with the blend amount on the layer weight node to get your desired outcome. If you go too far, you will blow it out in color, but you'll very quickly realize that when you start playing with it. Right now I'm just trying to reverse these sliders to see if I can get that nice highlight on the outside edge, and this is one way to do it. Okay, you can see that it is brighter on the edge and it is darker in the center of our little whip there. Little Deku's, I think it's called Black Whip, his ability. But if you swap the top and bottom emission shaders on the mix shader like that, you can go ahead and swap this color ramp back, and it does actually make more the desired effect that I was going for in the end, just because you have a little bit more control. It's essentially the same thing, so you can choose which one that you would like to use in your end result. For these emissions, I'm going to go ahead and bump them up a little bit, just to get a nice bright color. And if you don't have Node Wrangler enabled, you just need to go up to Edit Preferences, Add-ons, and enable Node Wrangler. I will show you how to do that a little later on in the video. On this noise texture, I'm going to go ahead and click on the noise texture and hit Control T with Node Wrangler enabled. I'm going to go ahead and hook up this mapping node to the noise texture vector. Click on the location Y and type in hashtag frame divided by 10 to give it a nice sideways movement. The higher the number you divide by, the slower it will be. Okay, at this point, I'm going to go ahead and hop back out into edit mode just to show you now. This is kind of how you pose the ability, right? So you would have your model in the center, or your character, creature, ability, whatever you want this ability to be on. It doesn't just have to be Black Whip, it can also be like a lava tube or stream, and I can show you a little bit later how we can achieve that effect as well. So if you're wondering how I'm making these points bigger or smaller, you just click on the handle of your Bezier curve and hit Alt-S and move your mouse around, and you can see that it will scale the individual points to get this wavy kind of effect. I'm going to go ahead and right click on our Bezier curve and convert to mesh. You can see it is now all a mesh instead of a curve. So get the desired effect you wish first with your curve, maybe make a few copies, and then convert them to mesh. Next, I'm going to add a modifier, and it's going to be the deform modifier, displace modifier. Create a new texture, go down to our textures tab, and we'll go ahead and change it to a Voronoi texture. Go back to the modifiers tab and change the strength of that down just a smidge. I think it's a little too intense. Something along these lines. Now, feel free to play around with this. There's many things that you can do to achieve your desired effect, but for the sake of this tutorial, this is the one that I'm going to be using. Go ahead and Shift A, add in an empty. It doesn't matter what kind of empty. And change your object type to that empty right there. This is going to be what drives that texture, okay? Then you're going to hashtag frame on the Z location for this empty here. It looks like it didn't work, so I'm going to go ahead and delete that driver, hashtag frame. Okay, yes, now it is working. So as you can see, the empty is infinitely going upwards, which is driving this motion you see happening here, okay? So the displace modifier is now being driven, as you can see, by that empty. So under your coordinates, go down to objects, and I drop the empty. I'm going to add another modifier on top of this, and it's going to just be a subdivision surface modifier. Bump it up to 2, just so it's a little smoother and less jagged. If you like it more jagged, you do not need to add that subdivision surface. Just changing some values real quick on my displace modifier, make it a little less intense again. The mid-level is kind of the overall shell thickness of it. You can think of it like that. And here I'm just going to show you, you can go back to your texture drivers and select different textures that are built into Blender itself. You can create your own, but for the sake of this tutorial, we're going to go ahead and just use the built-in ones. So the marble texture looks really, really cool for things like fire, abilities like that, auras. But for this tutorial, we're going to go ahead and stick with this one. Now, if you go down to the bottom and enable color ramp, just click the little color ramp box, you can actually slide around these sliders and get really unique effects. You can add in new colors and slide them close to each other to get just fascinating results, as you can see. But I'm going to go ahead and disable this and just keep it how we had it originally. Okay, so this is sort of the final product right here. And now we're going to make the bottom portion kind of the aura on the bottom of the character, if you will. You know, sort of dust and power that spikes off their feet in all those really gnarly animes. I don't think Deku really does it too often. I just think it looks cool, so I'm going to go ahead and toss it in. So we're going to go ahead and go to Shift A, add Mesh Cone. And we're going to go ahead and go into edit mode, delete the top vertice on the cone, so we're just left with a circle. We're going to go ahead and go to faces mode and inset that face with I, and then go ahead and delete the face in the center so we have a ring. We're going to loop select the verts and go to select, checker, deselect, grab them with G and move them up, and scale, Shift Z them outwards. This is kind of the base mesh for what we're going to be doing here. Stretch it up a little bit, make a little pretty spiky little object here. We're going to go ahead and create a color on this, okay? And I'm going to call it ground power. So we're going to go ahead and add in a mix shader, delete that principal BSDF like last time, and plug the mix shader into the surface of the material output. Go ahead and Shift A, add in a transparent BSDF, and hook that up to the bottom of the mix shader. Go ahead and duplicate this mix shader and plug it into the top of the first mix shader. Shift A and add in a layer weight node just like last time. And the reason for this is we're going to add another mask to this. Typically we don't want the foot power aura to cover the character, right? And the character is going to be in the center of this. So we want kind of the front of it to be much less visible. Still sort of visible, but much less visible. And you will see in a minute by adding this emission onto that shader, the mix shader, adding in a transparent into this mix shader. We can achieve that effect. And I will show you how right now. Go ahead and add in a color ramp just so we can kind of differentiate between the colors we're going to have. Go ahead and plug it into the top emission shader above the transparent. Select the colors you wish your ability to be. I'm going to go ahead and go with this lighter blue, crank up the strength of the emission shader, and probably something along the lines of a darker blue. With both of these shaders now, or both of these colors rather, sorry, I'm going to push them a little bit closer into each other and add a noise texture after. So Shift A noise texture, plug the color into the factor of the color ramp. Okay, now you can see that beautiful little texture we got going on there. And then change the blend mode to alpha clip on this texture over in the material properties, and the shadow to none. You can change the layer weight down a little bit just so we can get a baseline of what's happening here. We're going to mess with that a little bit later. Go 0.6 for now is good. Going to Shift A, add in a color ramp. I'm going to plug this color ramp into the factor of the mix shader there. Shift A, add in a noise texture. Connect the factor to the factor of that color ramp. And now you can kind of see what I'm going for here. See how pieces of it are invisible. And that's a little too much, and we will fix that here in a moment. But I'm going to go ahead and click on the noise texture and Control T to get that texture coordinate mapping node. Like I was talking about before, if you go up to Edit Preferences and click on Add-ons, type in Node, you'll see this Node Wrangler add-on here. Go ahead and enable that. Go down to the hamburger menu and save preferences. Then you can go ahead and exit out of this. Okay, so I'll just delete these real quick. Once you have enabled the Node Wrangler add-on, you can go ahead and click on the noise texture and hit Control T, T as in Tommy, and you will get the texture coordinate mapping nodes. I'm going to go ahead and hook up object to vector on the mapping instead of generated. Then I'm going to add a wave texture in between the mapping and noise, and I'm going to go ahead and cut this noise texture out here. I don't really like the way that looked. I think the wave texture is going to generate a better pattern for us. Now I'm going to switch bands to rings. I'm going to switch X to spherical, and I'm going to switch sine to saw. And get this little lotus flower looking object, which is also pretty cool in itself. But you can see as I move around it, if you had an object in the center, now you can see it's kind of invisible at the front, right? And the object will be covering up that back part. So this is good for 3D space. It's good for, it's gonna be invisible wherever the camera is. So any kind of animation is perfect for it. I'm gonna go ahead and, if you look at the phase offset, that is how we're gonna animate this one way. Okay, so we're going to up the distortion of this wave texture. Just not too much, just so we get this sort of an interesting pattern. You don't have to, but in this case, that is what I'm going to go with. If you tweak the handles here on this color ramp, you can see they get a little less or a little more prominent. I'm going to go with something like that. I think that looks good to me. For the layer weight, I'm going to go ahead and type in 0.3. Yeah, I think that looks pretty good. You can see that the front is gone and the back is there. And you can see I'm just going to play with it just so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. See, it was there and now it's gone. So we're back over to the wave texture. I just kind of want to animate it, so I'm going to go ahead and type in #frame divided by 2. And you can see it is going the wrong way, so I'm going to click on it again. Click into the front of frame and just hit minus. So now it says minus frame, okay? And that will reverse the direction. Go ahead and hit enter when you want to add that driver. I'm going to go over to add modifier, generate, and subdivision surface to round it out and smooth it out. In object mode, I'm going to click it and hit S for scale and Z. Okay, and you can kind of see how it stretched it out a little bit there. Go ahead and go to this color ramp and just make the colors ever so slightly brighter. Go ahead and turn up the emission a little bit so it's nice and bright. And you can kind of see we're getting this interesting wavy electrical effect already. Go ahead and turn up the distortion a little bit and just really play around with it. Okay, it's all about having fun, doing art and creating your own just interesting patterns here. Whatever makes you happy with your artwork. If you want to follow me directly, go for it. But if you want to do your own thing and learn off of this, then that is wonderful as well. Just like last time, we're going to create a displace modifier on it. I'm going to go down to the texture tab, put a noise texture, and turn that strength way down. From direction, we're going to change it to Z, and we're going to bump up the strength a little bit. That looks pretty good. Under local, change that to object, and once again we're going to eyedrop that. Remember, I'm going to go, you don't have to do this part, I'm just going to find that, there it is, the empty we used to drive our whip over there, and we are going to eyedrop that same empty for the black whip. It is going to be for this kind of power aura ability as well, so it drives it. See how it's moving it now? That's exactly what we want. All right, and so you can always play with the strength amount for that as well. Okay, once you're satisfied with where that's at, I'm just gonna make a few last moment adjustments here. I'm probably gonna rotate it around as well. So go back into the color of this little aura here. And under rotation, I'm going to #frame, hit enter. You can divide it by any amount you wish to make it faster or slower. I'm also going to do the same for the rotation on it as well, just to move it in space, and something a little bit faster, like divided by 40. Or a little bit slower, I'm sorry. A little bit slower. I'm going to put a minus in front of it so it's going the direction I wish. So you can see it's kind of rotating, spiking, doing all sorts of little fancy things there. And that is what we're going for. If we increase the layer weight just a little bit here to something like 0.8, you can see it starts to get thin in the front again. Maybe a little bit less, like 0.7. And that's kind of what I'm looking for. Just going to increase the brightness a little bit here. Pull these handles down. You can see you can change it all blue, lighter blue. You can change the colors of this too to make it like kind of like a red lightning fire aura, something like Natsu Dragonul might have, like a lightning flame dragon. Whatever you wish. In fact, over on the black whip here, you can turn it into lava like I talked about earlier. Simply by just changing the colors, and it doesn't have to be lava, it can be whatever you want it to be. Right, so you have a matching set here. Right, so a little bit of orange, a little bit of red, a little bit of black for the kind of the rocks, right? And yeah, just the more you slide it around, the more you play with it, you can see you can get some really cool effects there. bottom, it's going to be that tinier texture. So if you want more flame poking through, less flame poking through, you can slide those around until you have your desired effect. Now if you hit play again, you can see that this is the entire thing done. So just play around, have fun, and when you have your model you've made, or if you grab one online, all you have to do is put these objects around said model and you have your finished product. These actually animate really well with everything because we use that facing instead of Fresnel. Facing will always try to make that mask where the camera is in real space, in 3D space. So if you're animating and moving the camera, you'll kind of get that front part gone always, which is what we want. You can see there's my ability surrounding Deku there. You got the aura around his feet there. And as always guys, you can download these assets if you like them at my itch.io page, and the link is down in the description. And this is the exact same setup I used to create this outro. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching. Go ahead and like and subscribe, only if you want to.